I hope today's episode touches you as much as it touches me. It's a very tender and tough conversation and may be triggering to our more sensitive audience members. The things we talk about are critically important to the successful integration and potential healing for so many of our population. I invite you to listen with an open and compassionate heart, to be inspired as to how you can make a difference in your part of the world with this vital topic. Welcome to the Serve, Love, Lift podcast. I'm Tiffany Garvin. Years ago on a quiet beach in Hawaii, I felt the weight of the pain and struggles we all face in this world and how much we need each other. Soon after, this movement was born to serve, love, and lift. I believe that we are meant to serve the world with our unique gifts, love ourselves and others, and lift each other up to live with joy. This podcast is here to help you heal your heart and your life and empower you on your path to becoming the best version of yourself. I invite you to listen carefully and jot down notes that come to mind, whether they come from me or from your own heart. Then, share this episode with 3 people who you feel could use it today. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get going. On today's episode, we have the amazing Jessa Crisp. Jessa leverages her personal experiences of overcoming severe abuse and human trafficking to empower others, holding an MA in clinical mental health counseling and working towards a PhD. She actively engages in mentoring survivors, offering expert training to various organizations, and has contributed to multiple platforms and agencies, including Homeland Security and People magazine. I can't wait to dive in. Thank you for being here, Jessa. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It is such an excitement for me to be able to join you today.
Your story is incredible. I'd love for you to share what part of your story that you want to share.
Thank you. So I was trafficked, both sex and labor trafficking, and it started within my family, and I experienced that throughout my whole entire childhood. I was not allowed to go to school during that time. And so much of the past, 13, 14 years has been me learning who I am in freedom and who I am as a person, who I want to be. And so as I have gone through this process of my own survivorship, but then also too through my own recovery, it's given me such a heart and such a passion to be able to just help others who have also experienced the crime of human trafficking, both sex and labor trafficking. I think we don't talk enough about the spectrum and the typologies of exploitation and trafficking. So that is extremely important for us to do. And so my life goal and mission is to be able to raise awareness surrounding what exploitation and human trafficking is, and then to be able to empower those who are helping survivors to be able to do so in a survivor-centered and trauma-informed way.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
And I know that some of the focus of your efforts are on post-traumatic growth and that silver lining, that miracle that can happen, that even despite the most awful traumas and the most hideous circumstances and past, that there is beauty that can come from that.
Yeah. It is so true. And I do want people to know that it's been a hard process. Moving into post-traumatic growth does not happen overnight. And I think sometimes we wish healing would take place overnight. Sometimes we wish that things would be a snap of the finger and life is going to be automatically better. And yet, I do want people to know that there were days and have been so many days where I haven't wanted to get out of bed, or the grief is so deep, wanting to dig me into a hole, into a pit. And yet, I think where post-traumatic growth comes in is the desire to not stay in that pit, but rather to go, okay, how can this trauma, how can so much pain and so much suffering propel me into creating change in this world? I recently wrote a chapter in the book called Psychological Perspectives on Human Trafficking, and it was just published by APA in November, and I co-authored chapter 10 with Dr. Becca Johnson. And one of the things that we looked at within that chapter was on using a positive psychology approach with working with those who've experienced human trafficking. And one element of that is post-traumatic growth. And within post-traumatic growth, there's this element of being able to go, traumas happen, and we're not going to deny the reality of the trauma that has taken place. But I'm also not going to take that trauma as a death sentence. I'm going to allow it to move me into change, to move me into a place where I'm going to make a difference in this world. And it's so profound because I think survivors of trafficking specifically are so resilient. And yet resilience is very different than post-traumatic growth. One can go ahead and be resilient, but not experience post-traumatic growth, where one can also too experience post-traumatic growth while also being resilient. So it becomes this element where they're so interconnected, but it is so amazing because I see so many survivors just living a life where they are creating such change and such beauty. And to me, that is just the pinnacle of what post-traumatic growth is, and how other people, no matter what one has experienced, they too can move into a place of experiencing hope and joy.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. And this is the point of conversations like this, is to help people recognize that it's not a death sentence, that there is more to life after trauma. You can recover, you can create a life of joy. That's amazing. Where do you see survivors getting stuck along their journey? And you mentioned a desire to heal. How many times do you see where the weight is so heavy that they struggle to even summon up the desire to heal?
Oh, such a good question. I think it's so multifaceted, and I wish things were so clear and like so easy, like check this box and check that box. I think specifically when it comes to survivors of trafficking and them getting stuck in their healing process and healing journey, I think we can look at it from a physical resource side, so the lack of housing or the lack of safe housing, the lack of stable housing, the lack of food, the lack of medical care, even the lack of mental health care. So the lack of something that's needed to survive, which then puts a person back into survival, puts a person back into a place where they are needing to fight with every ounce of who they are to stay alive, which then triggers all of these other symptoms and elements of complex trauma. I think the other side of it, though, is not just the lack of something needed. I think it's also, too, the lack of trained professionals, individuals who are trained in how trauma impacts the body and the lifelong process of recovery. And so, like, for instance, even just personally from my own experiences, I have a lot of medical struggles when a body has been through so much stress on a repetitive daily basis. That impacts the body. And we see through the research study that Kaiser did in the 1990s with their reverse childhood experience study, seeing the reverse childhood experiences a person has and how that correlates to the higher physical struggles, higher psychological struggles, poverty, lack of education. There's such a strong correlation between the two. And so I have medical providers who have been trained in being able to go ahead and provide comprehensive treatment for a body that has experienced so much. And yet, my medical providers are a rarity. I work with so many other survivors of human trafficking, and I've done nonprofit work. I am a mental health clinician. I see survivors within my clinical practice. I worked with hundreds of survivors of all typologies of trafficking, all genders, all sexualities. And the common theme that I see is medical providers who don't know how to treat the body when it's been through so much trauma. or how to treat the body with a trauma-informed perspective so that the body is able to relax to receive the care and treatment versus being on alert and being in that activated state and it actually becoming more traumatizing and triggering. Alongside that, though, are mental health professionals. In the United States of America, a person can go ahead and graduate from a clinical mental health program and not receive any training in trauma. And that to me is a devastation to people who have experienced trauma. So we have all of these mental health clinicians who are treating people who have extreme trauma backgrounds. And yet they actually re-traumatize these individuals because of the lack of training and understanding on how trauma impacts the brain, the body, the emotions. And so that to me is a grave injustice as well. So once again, very multifaceted. We have the lack of things needed, but then we also have the lack of training within professionals in our community.
Wow. For our listeners who may not understand what it means to have a trauma-informed care provider, what does that look like? What's the difference in how a trauma-informed practitioner would approach a trauma survivor in an effective way versus a re-traumatizing way?
Yeah. So a trauma-informed care provider would understand the impact of trauma on the individual, as well as really take steps to avoid re-traumatization. So, for instance, a trauma-informed medical provider might say, I'm going to touch you here. Are you okay with that? And receive consent in that process. Or they might go, you could take this medication or this medication. What would you like to choose? And so creating choice, creating autonomy, creating agency, creating consent throughout the whole entire experience. And then when it comes to a mental health professional, somebody who can be aware of when a person comes into the office, what in the office might be overwhelming or triggering to them. Knowing like, okay, when I walk in behind you, not knowing who's behind you, that can be overwhelming and triggering. So like being just aware of like self and being aware of the client and really meeting the needs of that client to avoid re-traumatization.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. It seems like helping the survivor feel safe and empowered
Yes.
and as a very clear partner in their healing process.
Exactly. And I love the word partner because it's that collaboration. During exploitation and trafficking, everything is taken away from that survivor. But when you have a care provider come in and go, I'm here to help you and to empower you and to walk this journey alongside you, to partner you in being able to be your own person, to be able to be in control of your body. That is such an important part of this process.
I recently spoke with a gal who is a founder of a women's shelter.
Mhm.
And one of the things that she said was how important it is to ask good questions and to create a situation where beliefs are challenged because coming from this kind of scenario, all of your beliefs say, I have no control over my life, over my future. There is no future. It's all present and managing my stress and my stress response
Mhm.
in each moment. And so being able to provide a safe space where it's empowering and giving these women and men and children, right, the opportunity to have a say, to feel like somebody's concerned about their well-being can then help begin to shift at least some of those beliefs that hold themselves trapped, right? They may be free now, but how many things are still in them that prevent their freedom truly, that keep them feeling trapped? What kinds of things have you recognized around that?
Oh, it's so true. Those beliefs are so deeply rooted. And yet, even from an agricultural perspective, and I've done some gardening, I've done some planting, some very basic planting in my house in pots. And yet, you have to pull it out by the roots, the weed, to be able to go ahead and help the plants that you're nourishing to flourish. And so I love what that individual that you did that interview with was talking about because it's so important for us to go ahead and recognize, okay, what are those weeds? What are those roots? What is connected to that? Where is that? Like, what is the anchor to that lie, to that belief? And then be able to go ahead and replace it with truth. I think one of the things that I've noticed with the survivors that I've worked with is, like you said, it's so hard for them to see the future and to go ahead and engage with the future. And part of that is many survivors of human trafficking live in this kind of perspective where it is so challenging for them to think beyond, I'm going to live beyond this age. A lot of survivors have an age that they believe that they're going to die by. And and so for them, it's like, what is the point about even thinking about the future if I'm not going to be alive? And so for me, I like to ask questions like, what would you like to do tomorrow? Or even questions about like next month, like what is a goal for next month that we can work on together? And being able to walk that journey with them so that they are not alone in figuring out what those roots are. And then helping them to know it's okay to dream again. And yes, it might not feel safe within your nervous system to dream, but I'm right beside you and I will walk this journey with you. You're not alone as you continue to figure out what it looks like to live beyond into the future and to be able to dream again. I think very personally, for me, I really did not believe I was going to live beyond like my early 20s. And it was after I started school that I began to dream for the first time. And I didn't share this in the beginning, but because of my trafficking and exploitation, I was not allowed to go to school at all. I remember vividly watching kids walk to the elementary school that was just beyond the backyard of my suburban house that I grew up in, and just seeing them and tangibly wondering what lay within the mystery of that schoolhouse or in that elementary school. And yet, it was through my escape and through the process of being at my own safe house that I began to go ahead and go, I could actually go to school. And I had people believing in me. And one day when I got really angry, like, I can't do this, they were like, no, you can do this. And I believe in you. And if you can read, you can learn anything. And I had to remind myself of that. So I took a black Sharpie and I wrote on my arm, if I can read, I can learn anything. And then that gave me the courage to continue. And I got accepted into a college, which never thought it would ever happen. But that was because of my GED. And then it was through getting good grades, through studying and like being able to go ahead and really experience that, that I began to go, if I can get 100% on a weekly quiz, then I can go ahead and someday get my master's and doctorate. And now that I'm a PhD student, I'm like, yeah, anybody can do this. It's hard and you don't need to be perfect, but it's going ahead and taking those baby steps. And it's hard for some people to take baby steps, and that's okay. It's okay that it's hard, but there's people out there who believe in you.
Hey, amazing listeners. Ready for a journey to emotional well-being? I've got a gift just for you. Download your free Quickstart guide to emotional healing now. Take the first step toward healing emotional wounds and embracing joy. This step-by-step guide is your compass to a brighter, more empowered life. Dive into practical exercises and insights right from your pocket. Visit tiffanygarvin.com/emotional healing to claim your free guide today. Let's start this transformative journey together. Your emotional freedom awaits. It sounds like the community is critical in this process of not just being saved. Wait, that's the wrong word, right?
Typically, the word that's used is recovered.
Thank
So in the US, we
you.
use the word recover to talk
Yeah.
about people who have been able to get away from a trafficking experience situation. Another word that's often used is, or at least I use it, the word escape, because I didn't have anybody come rescue me. I
Yeah.
didn't have anybody come and save me. I didn't have anybody go ahead and recover me, but rather I was able through other people to begin to find internal strength to go, I am not living my life this way. I'm going to leave. And so having that community is so important. It even makes me think. So like my first exam, such a pivotal moment for me in in college. I was at the doctor's office. I was getting medical treatment and care, and the nurse came in. And she's like, "What are you doing, hun?" And I told her that I'm studying for my first ever like exam and test in my life, other than the GED, which I almost bombed. I barely passed. And she's like, "Let me teach you." She spent a whole hour in between patients teaching me how to study and teaching me and going through flashcards with me. When I graduated, it was during COVID with my master's, and she was online watching the graduation. And it was so powerful because that individual, that nurse, having reconnected all of these years later, like just being able to have her belief in me gave me the strength. And then that planted the seed for dreams, which has led to where I am today.
What an amazing story. What a beautiful person. Wow. So, as people are recovered, as
Yeah.
survivors are recovered, what is that process? Because so many key things need to happen in those first few hours and days, right?
Yeah.
So that they don't go back, so that they don't give up hope.
Mhm.
What are some of those key things that need to happen so that it sets them up to succeed and progress?
Yeah. So first and foremost is having a safe place to go to and being able to physically get away and physically be able to have relief and get sleep. Sleep, food is essential. Those are the basic building blocks to us as humans. And so I think that is so vital, and it's also such a gap in service provision today. Right now, when a person escapes, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for them to get into a program and to get a bed, if they can even get in within 2 to 3 weeks. And so then what happens is a lot of these survivors are going to hotels and staying at hotels, which are places full of trauma for many survivors of specifically sexual exploitation, sex trafficking. So the first thing is helping them to be able to rest and to go ahead and begin to get those immediate needs met. Then the next thing would definitely be like helping them to go ahead and get their legal needs met. So going ahead, making sure that they have the protection that they need, making sure that if they are undocumented or if they have had papers taken away, that we can start that process. And then going ahead, and this is where I think my perspective might be a little different than most people's perspective. I think a lot of people in direct services go, okay, well, we're going to get them into counseling and get them talking about the trauma. Where from my perspective, I see that if we rush it too fast, then we're going to overwhelm and flood an individual, and then they can't cope. And then it creates a place where then they go to old coping mechanisms to just survive. So that's where I'm like, let's get a survivor leader, a lived experience expert, somebody who has been through exploitation and trafficking, who can sit down and you can go ahead and help give this person hope. Like, you can do this too, it's hard. I believe in you. And then being able to go ahead and continue to build that safety and stability, which is a concept from a person by the name of Judith Berman. She has a 3 phase model of recovery from trauma. So safety and stability would be the first phase. And then the second phase would be reprocessing the traumas. And then the third one is going ahead and reintegrating back into society. For many of the survivors that I work with and have worked with over the past decade, safety and stability can take years. And so in those first couple of hours, we're just helping them to feel safe and helping to create a place where their nervous systems can begin to rest.
Yeah, that's what was going through my mind is
Yeah.
this chronic stress. I mean, we talk about in general society how chronic stress is really an epidemic, but when you talk about the level, the
Mhm.
intensity of the chronic stress triggers that these survivors are dealing with, it's off the charts.
Yep.
So, what kinds of coping mechanisms and stress calming nervous system resetting methods and modalities have you discovered for yourself and for your clients that are really helpful?
Yeah, so I think at the very beginning, I think many people think of stress reduction as looking like meditation and mindfulness. For somebody whose survival has been on doing stuff and they're just so activated, that can actually be extremely triggering because that to them can actually be like, I'm gonna get hurt. And so some of the things that I actually see to be really beneficial, specifically in those first months, those first years, is having them go for walks. Let's go for a walk together. So we're not creating a place where greater triggers can arise, but rather we're slowly helping the nervous system to go from that dorsal vagal state closer to that ventral vagal state. One of the things that we know from polyvagal theory is that ventral vagal state takes place through connection, and that's the place of calm and rest. And so by building that connection and doing things to help the nervous system to move closer to that through connection, but also to I'm going to gently move the body. So another thing is that I love straws. So it's a really cool thing. It can actually activate the vagus nerve, which is we activate the vagus nerve that can also help the nervous system to regulate. And so blowing bubbles or going ahead and drinking water out of a straw. So I often have juice boxes in my office all the time for people. And I'm like, and I will go ahead and be the one to go like take the first step. So I'm gonna blow bubbles first. And like, did you see that? Did you hear that? Would you like to go ahead and try blowing bubbles as well? So I know that I'm saying like a lot of big words. If people are interested, if your listeners are interested, they can research and look at polyvagal theory and really begin to research that to understand more about the vagus nerve and helping the nervous system to calm down in the midst of their own process because everybody has experienced some level of activation, stress, or trauma.
Thank you. That's exactly where I wanted to go next. These beautiful things that you're talking about and recognizing what treatment, what method, what response would be helpful for one person might not be helpful for another. So as
Exactly.
they have these new ideas and recognize what's going on and recognize, don't think that there's something wrong with you if this one approach is not working. Try another one, try another
Exactly.
one. And yes, we have all been traumatized to some degree or another, whether it's past childhood experiences that were difficult. Maybe someone was bullied or picked on, or
Yeah.
I mean, even something as small as feeling like you don't belong in a work scenario. You
Yeah.
go to work every day, but you feel like maybe it's real, maybe it's perceived that you're ostracized or you're alone.
Yeah.
And these things can be traumatizing
Yeah.
for the average person. And
Mhm.
so, as we take some wisdom from the intense trauma conversation and
Mhm.
bring it into our own lives and recognize, okay, it may not be this awful thing that happened to me, but this was hard. This
Yeah.
situation, this experience was hard for me, and I'm still kind of processing it. It can be a hard conversation with someone. And if we don't process through what we feel, then that can lead to and develop into our own sets of traumas, which can then progress into other issues.
Completely.
What do you think causes some survivors to then recede from life
Mm.
and others to rise and seek to serve like yourself? I mean, is it just that they can't get past this stress and these chronic triggers and the beliefs that there isn't anything past next week or next month?
Mhm.
What are some of those things that you see in the difference between the survivors who again retreat and those who just push forward and want to give back and serve like you?
Yeah. Oh, it's so hard because this is a really complex question. I think some of the reasons that at least I have witnessed and have seen, but also have personally experienced, is when one has found their only connection and place of belonging with a person who abuses and uses them, that really creates a lot of attachment wounds and attachment struggles for a person. And attachment, though, is such a human need. It is a human right. It's something that is essential for individuals to be able to engage in this world and to function in a healthy way. And so I see traffickers really exploit attachment. I see traffickers also to exploit addictions and use addictions for some people, and not all people, but for some people, as a means and methods of controlling a person, getting somebody addicted to a substance, and then going ahead and going, well, if you continue to do what I tell you to do, well, then I will continue to give this substance to you. So that can be a huge part of the process, which then creates a lot of layers for a person when the addiction is present, and then the struggle to go ahead and detox, but the need to still attach to something. So instead of attaching necessarily to the person, they're attaching to the substance. I also have worked with a lot of people where an abuser, a trafficker, might go ahead and get a person pregnant and then use that child as a means of control. And sadly, our judicial system is so very messed up, and many judges or many attorneys might not understand fully what is taking place in those situations. And that can be because of threats that the victim has experienced and has received, which creates so much fear to go ahead and even share everything of what's happened. And so it's so multifaceted. I think another element is we have epigenetics. So within epigenetics, we see that the genetic makeup throughout the generations of a person's life can impact the way that a person is resilient or might go ahead and be more prone to mental health diagnoses like PTSD. And so the person's epigenetics might be such that they are more resilient when the trauma happens, to the point where they're able to go ahead, and when the trauma takes place, they are able to go, okay, I am still gonna live, which then gives them that ability, going back to the post-traumatic growth, to go ahead and move into post-traumatic growth afterwards. So it's so multifaceted. I think it's so vital for us as providers or caregivers, people who just simply care, to understand that even if a person goes back to the life or goes back to exploitation, that they're not bad. This is a trauma response. And by looking at it as a trauma response, it can help us have empathy and compassion. And it can go, okay, like, how can we meet those trauma needs versus going, okay, well, you missed your chance, and being able to have more empathy versus disdain.
Well, when you really expound on that, it does kind of feel hopeless.
Mhm.
So it would be amazing to have more trauma-informed lawyers, judges, government officials, police officers.
Yep.
This may be a totally unrealistic question or unfair question, but what would it take to trauma inform more people? Even, I mean, let's take this opportunity.
Okay.
What kinds of things, as we're talking to whoever's listening, in whatever profession they're in whatever situation they're in, if they know someone who's experienced trauma, if they are traumatized in some way,
Mhm.
how can we support people, encourage people to be more trauma informed?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, because everybody in this globe has experienced trauma of some type,
Mm,
being able to show self-compassion. It's so vital. If we struggle to show our very own self-compassion, then we will never be able to show compassion externally.
mm,
So being able to shift the focus to giving kindness and love to ourselves, being able to see ourselves with, done the very best that I can do for today, and I'll try again tomorrow. Or this is a really hard moment right now. It's okay to be sad. Going ahead and shifting that internal focus and perspective, which then can go ahead and give us the ability to shift externally. I think kind of being more tangible, I think within each sphere, within each profession, within each job that a person does, we can go ahead and begin to advocate. So this year I did a bunch of trainings of hotels for a very large hotel association, and training hotels how to be trauma informed, and
wow.
training hotels how to see everybody and treat everybody with kindness and care, and the possibility that everybody's experienced trauma, and being able to go ahead and do so in a way that doesn't create re-victimization, re-traumatization. But then also too, like being able to take that to your workplace and go like, I just heard this amazing podcast and heard that trauma-informed care is vital for society to move into kindness and care for humanity. Could we go ahead and figure out a way for us to get training in this? And that could be for somebody who works at a gas station, that could be for somebody who works in a doctor's office, for somebody who, whatever you do, a teacher. And then if you are passionate about getting training and education in anti-trafficking and what trafficking looks like in your sphere of influence, that's vital too, because then you're taking trauma-informed training, pairing it with anti-trafficking training, and then you can begin to see trafficking taking place in your environment. And that could be really scary for some people. And I want to acknowledge that it can be scary. And also, too, if it wasn't for somebody recognizing trafficking in my life, I would not be here today. And everybody holds such a powerful place to change trafficking in this nation and around this world. And we all have a responsibility to do so. One of my favorite quotes is by Eleanor Roosevelt, and she states, freedom makes a huge requirement of every human being. With freedom comes responsibility. The first time I heard that quote, I was free. I was no longer owned by somebody else. And so my responsibility has taken me into this place of going, I need to empower other people. And yet, you also have a responsibility. Are you going to go ahead and go, this is scary? This is so hard. I'm scared to see trafficking around me. Or are you going to go, I hold a unique place where I can begin to see exploitation and trafficking, which means that I then can go ahead and make a difference in people's lives through trauma-informed care and through recognizing what human trafficking looks like in your sphere of influence.
That's incredible. Thank you for that. I think that awareness and that invitation is invaluable. I know there are people listening who are being inspired. I am so grateful for this conversation that we've had. What does the world need to know about post-traumatic growth?
Mhm. I think what the world needs to know is that no matter what one has experienced, no matter what you have experienced or what a loved one has experienced, that does not need to define you. The world needs to know that it is possible to heal. It is possible to move into a place where you can enjoy life, where you can thrive, where you can go ahead and laugh authentically, where you can smile from the very depths of your being. And I think that's lost in the sadness and the depravity of what we see on the news. But I just want people to know that it is possible to heal and that no matter what we've experienced, we don't have to be defined by our past.
Amen. I love that. I completely agree with that. I would love to just keep talking to you. You are inspiring and powerful, and I feel so sad for your struggles.
Yeah.
But I am so grateful that you escaped. I'm so grateful that you are being a spokesman for this and bringing awareness and bringing information that can empower and motivate people, because the bad guys aren't going to win.
Nope, they're not allowed.
They're not allowed. I love that. The good guys are winning.
Yes, they are.
And whether it's your big time media with recent movies,
Yep.
or all these incredible shelters and nonprofit organizations in the country and around the world
Mhm.
who have such heart empowered people
Yes.
on a mission, right? This is not just a job, this is a calling
Yep.
that creates a movement and a scenario where people can be recovered,
Yes.
people can heal, they can create a new and wonderful and beautiful life for themselves.
Yes. Oh, so true.
Any last words, any other bits of your heart that you want to share, any message that you want to send to anyone else listening?
Think so. I just feel so very honored and grateful for the people who've taken time out of their day for listening, but then also for you for what you're doing to change this world. So thank you.
Thank you for being with me. Remember to share this episode with 3 people who you feel could use it today. Don't want to wait for next week for new insights and wisdom? Go to www.tiffanygarvin.com/emotional healing for a free guide to help you begin healing the emotional wounds that are holding you back. Again, the link is tiffanygarvin.com/emotional healing. It will be in the show notes as well. I believe in you. See you next week.